Emma Collins was 32 years old and a single mother to little Noah, a lively 6-year-old boy full of curiosity and energy. That Saturday morning, they decided to visit the playground near their home, a place Emma had known since childhood, a spot where joy usually blossomed. The sky was clear, the sun gently warming the air, and the sound of children's laughter filled the space. She watched Noah run toward the old wooden slide when an unsettling chill crept down her spine. A feeling that shattered the calm of the bright morning. Emma paused for a moment, her gaze fixed on the rusty swings, as a soft breeze seemed to whisper something faint, something she couldn't quite grasp but that made her shudder. Suddenly, everything around her fell silent, the children's laughter vanished, as if swallowed by the wind. In a split second, Emma saw a vivid and terrifying image. The large wooden slide, worn and unstable, creaking and slowly giving way until, with a sharp crack, it collapsed, sending shards of wood and metal flying through the air. Children screamed, scattering in panic, but Noah was at the center of the disaster, frozen in fear. Her heart tightened, cold sweat running down her neck. This was more than a hunch. It was a premonition, a terrifying vision playing out in her mind, with sights and sounds so real it felt impossible to escape. She blinked, and the vision faded. Reality rushed back with a jolt, the children's voices returned gradually, and Noah called for her, smiling, unaware of the terror his mother had just experienced. Emma gripped her son's hand tightly, a knot forming in her throat. "We have to leave, Noah. Right now." But deep down, she knew escaping wouldn't be that simple. And as they walked away, silence returned for a brief moment, as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. Emma's heart was still pounding as she hurried away from the playground, her grip on Noah's small hand tight enough to leave marks. The laughter and chatter of children filled the air, but to her, the world felt off, as if the joyful sounds were coming from far away, muffled by an invisible barrier. She couldn't shake the cold dread that had settled deep inside her chest, the echo of that terrifying vision refusing to fade. Later that afternoon, the news confirmed her worst fears. A tragic accident had unfolded at the park. The old wooden slide, long neglected and weathered by years of rain and sun, had suddenly collapsed beneath the weight of several children. Panic erupted as parents rushed to the scene, screaming for their kids. Emergency crews arrived quickly, tending to the injured and helping frightened families. Miraculously, Noah was unharmed. Emma's instinct to leave early had saved her son from being caught in the disaster. But others were not so lucky. Emma found herself seated in a sterile hospital waiting room, surrounded by anxious faces, each etched with shock and relief. She met Mrs. Thompson, a nervous woman whose young son had been playing just steps from the slide but darted away at the last second. There was also David, a young father whose distracted moment with his phone had nearly cost him his daughter. The shared experience forged an unspoken bond between them, but their reactions varied widely. Mrs. Thompson spoke in trembling whispers about how fragile life was. David dismissed the event as sheer luck, insisting it was just one of those things. Emma, however, felt a gnawing certainty that this was no accident, that fate had been toying with them all. As the news media swarmed the story, interviews with parents and officials revealed a common thread. The playground had been flagged for repairs months ago, but budget delays had pushed the maintenance back. The structure's decay was well known, but the timing of its collapse felt ominous, almost deliberate. At home, Emma's mind raced with images of the slide breaking apart, the children running in terror, the shards flying through the air. She replayed her premonition, the chilling silence that had swallowed the park, the way time seemed to slow as disaster approached. She knew she had seen the future, and that knowledge both terrified and haunted her. Days passed, but Emma's paranoia only deepened. She found herself avoiding playgrounds, scanning every public space with a desperate vigilance. Noah's innocent laughter, once a balm to her soul, now sounded fragile, vulnerable. At night, she woke drenched in sweat, heart hammering as shadows in the room morphed into threats. Her sister, Claire, grew worried. "Emma, "You're scaring yourself," Claire said over the phone one evening. "Noah's safe. The accident was tragic, but it's over. You have to try to relax." Emma's voice was low, tense. "I can't, Claire. Something's still wrong. I feel it. Like something's watching us." The silence that followed was heavy. On the other end, Claire sighed, unsure how to comfort her. One sleepless night, Emma sat by Noah's bedside, watching his peaceful face bathed in moonlight. The clock's ticking was loud in the quiet room, each second stretching longer than the last. She thought she heard faint whispers carried by the wind outside. Distant laughter, a child's cry, then nothing. The silence was suffocating, pregnant with menace. Emma shivered, realizing that escaping the accident hadn't freed her from the shadow that loomed over them. Whatever had nearly destroyed the playground that day was still out there, lurking just beyond sight, and it wasn't done yet. The days after the playground collapse were heavy with unease. Emma tried to hold on to normalcy for Noah's sake, but the dark cloud hanging over them seemed to thicken with every passing hour. She wasn't the only one feeling the weight of something sinister. Among the small circle of survivors and their families, whispers of dread began to spread. It was David who fell first. Just a week after the accident, news broke that David had died in a bizarre car crash. Witnesses said his vehicle had veered suddenly off the highway, colliding with a tree in an almost impossible way. The police called it a tragic accident, a moment of distracted driving or perhaps a mechanical failure. But Emma, clutching her phone in trembling hands as she read the headline, couldn't shake the feeling that it was something else entirely. David's death wasn't just an isolated event. It was the first domino to fall. At the hospital, Emma had seen the fragile line between life and death, but now death was reaching out to snatch those who had escaped the playground disaster. She replayed every detail, searching for patterns. David's careless mistake on the road, the sudden swerve, the silence that followed the crash, it felt like the shadow she had sensed, creeping closer, ready to claim its next victim. Emma's mind raced. Could the premonition have been a warning not only of the collapse but of what would follow? Was the tragedy still unfolding, inching toward her and Noah? Her sister Claire tried to comfort her, but even Claire's reassurances began to falter under the growing tension. "It's just a terrible coincidence," Claire insisted during a frantic phone call, but Emma's eyes betrayed her doubt. Then there was Mrs. Thompson, who called Emma late one night, her voice trembling. Her son had been acting strangely, withdrawn and fearful. "He says he sees shadows," Mrs. Thompson whispered. "He says the playground wants him back." Emma shuddered, realizing that fear wasn't confined to herself. It had infected everyone touched by the accident. As Emma tried to piece together the sequence of events, she found herself haunted by the recurring sensation that something unseen was stalking them. The pattern was beginning to reveal itself. A deadly chain reaction set in motion by that fatal day in the park. But not everyone believed her. Her friend Mark, skeptical and grounded, accused her of imagining connections where none existed. "Emma, you need to stop letting fear control you. People die every day, and accidents happen. That doesn't mean death is hunting you." Emma wanted to believe him. She needed to believe it. But the gnawing feeling in her gut said otherwise. She knew she was running out of time. And the clock was ticking. Emma sat alone in her dimly lit living room, the glow of the television casting flickering shadows across the walls. News reports continued to play, recounting the tragic events surrounding the playground collapse and the mysterious car crash that claimed David's life. But for Emma, the story was far from over. She was beginning to see the terrifying pattern beneath the surface. She pulled out a notebook, pages filled with scribbled notes, timelines, and names. A desperate attempt to make sense of the chaos. Emma carefully traced the sequence: the playground accident, David's crash, the whispers of fear from other parents, and the sudden change in behavior from those closest to the tragedy. Each event was a link in a chain she couldn't break. Her hands trembled as she connected the dots. It was as if death had a schedule, a cruel agenda that no one could escape. She called Mrs. Thompson, hoping to gather more information. On the other end, the woman's voice was strained, her son's fears growing louder. "He says the shadows are coming for us, Emma. He says there's no escape." Emma's chest tightened. The shadows she had felt lurking were no longer just a feeling, they were real, reaching out for those marked by fate. Determined to act, Emma reached out to Mark again, pleading for help. But his skepticism remained firm. "You're letting fear twist your mind. We have to live, Emma. You can't keep chasing ghosts." But Emma couldn't stop. That night, she made another call, to a local librarian known for archiving old newspapers. She requested access to archives, searching for stories of similar incidents, accidents, unexplained deaths, strange coincidences tied to playgrounds and children's parks. Hours later, Emma found herself poring over yellowed clippings, each story eerily resembling their own tragedy. Accidents that defied explanation, deaths that followed narrow escapes, and a recurring motif. Playgrounds, children, and something dark lurking in the background. Her phone buzzed, a message from Claire. "Be careful," it read. "You're scaring yourself, but maybe there's truth in this." Emma swallowed hard. She knew what was coming next. She tried to warn Noah's school, but her frantic calls were dismissed. "We have safety protocols in place," the principal assured her. "There's nothing to worry about." But Emma wasn't convinced. She watched her son play, feeling the weight of every moment, every step. Then it happened. A scream shattered the afternoon calm. Emma's heart leapt as she ran toward the sound, only to find that Mrs. Thompson's son had fallen from a swing, a freak accident, the doctor said. But Emma saw the pattern, the relentless march of death that couldn't be stopped. She tried to intervene, to save, but it felt as if fate had already written the script. More deaths followed. Strange, sudden, and impossible to predict. Each time Emma's warnings went unheeded, each time, she arrived just moments too late. The truth became undeniable, death was stalking them, unstoppable and cruel. And no one was safe. Emma's world had shrunk to a narrow corridor of fear and desperation. The pattern of death was no longer just a theory, it was a grim reality stalking every step she took. She knew she had to find a way to break the cycle before it was too late. She gathered the small group of survivors and their families, Claire, Mrs. Thompson, and a few others who had narrowly escaped the playground collapse. Their faces were pale, haunted by sleepless nights and mounting losses. Together, they formed a fragile alliance, united by terror and the need to fight back. Their first step was investigation. Days turned into nights as Emma led the group through old newspaper archives, online forums, and police reports. They searched for any clue, a pattern, a link, a warning, that could explain why these tragedies were unfolding. They found chilling stories. Playground accidents followed by mysterious deaths, families torn apart by sudden loss, and eerie coincidences no one could explain. The tragedies weren't isolated, they were echoes of something older, something darker. The group experimented with desperate measures. Emma suggested skipping playground visits, avoiding crowded places, and changing daily routines. Claire took to switching cars and routes, hoping to confuse whatever force was targeting them. Some attempts seemed to work. For a brief time, the group felt a flicker of hope as no new incidents occurred. But the reprieve was short-lived. One evening, Mark, the skeptic who had mocked Emma's fears, joined the group reluctantly after his brother was found dead under mysterious circumstances. His skepticism shattered, replaced by raw panic. The news spread fast. Another death. Another piece of the puzzle falling into place. The relentless force behind the tragedies was tightening its grip. Panic grew. The group argued over what to do next. Some wanted to run, to hide indefinitely. Others wanted answers, to understand the force that haunted them. Emma refused to give up. She found an old urban legend about a curse linked to forgotten playgrounds, places where sorrow and neglect invited darkness to dwell. The legend spoke of a cycle that claimed the innocent to feed an ancient hunger. With mounting dread, Emma realized they were trapped in a deadly game. One with no clear rules and no guarantee of escape. As they planned their next move, Emma's phone buzzed with a message, a photo of Noah, smiling at the park playground. The message had no sender. Her blood ran cold. The clock was ticking. And the race against death had only just begun. The group had been reduced to just two, Emma and Mark. The others were gone, swallowed by the relentless, invisible force that had haunted their lives since that terrible day at the park. Each loss had chipped away at their sanity, leaving only raw fear and desperate hope in its place. Emma's hands trembled as she clutched the worn toy Noah had dropped at the playground, the last tangible memory of innocence and safety she had left. Mark paced nearby, his eyes darting nervously at every shadow. The silence around them was suffocating, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves and the distant hum of the city slowly waking up. The plan they had devised was risky, almost reckless. Return to the heart of the nightmare, the playground where it all began. Emma believed confronting the source might break the deadly cycle, or at least give them a chance to escape its grasp. Mark was skeptical, but exhaustion had pushed him into agreement. As twilight slipped into night, the park became a ghostly shell of its former self. The swings swayed gently in the breeze, creaking like old bones. The slide stood silent, its metal surface cold and unwelcoming. The playground's bright colors were faded, shadows stretching long and menacing beneath the street lamps. They set up cameras and makeshift wards, strings of salt, candles in jars, anything Emma had read might keep darkness at bay. Each flicker of the candlelight seemed to push back the creeping dread, if only temporarily. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Every snapping twig or whisper of wind made their hearts leap. Emma's breath came shallow, her eyes scanning the dark for any sign of the presence that had haunted their lives. Then, unexpectedly, the sound came, a child's laughter. Soft, distant, yet chillingly hollow. It cut through the silence like a knife. Mark's face went pale. "It's here," he whispered, voice barely audible. Emma gripped the toy tighter, feeling the weight of every lost moment with Noah. She forced herself forward, chasing the echo of that laughter, but it slipped away like smoke, teasing and elusive. Mark staggered back, his voice trembling. "We can't fight this. It's not just fate. It's something else. Something hungry." Emma refused to believe it, refused to give up. They stayed through the night, tension thick as fog, waiting for dawn and the fragile hope it might bring. As the first light crept over the horizon, painting the sky in pale hues, a quiet calm settled around them. For a moment, the cycle seemed broken, the relentless march of death paused. Emma exhaled slowly, the weight on her chest lightening, just a little. But beneath that fragile peace, a cold truth lingered, whispering in the corners of her mind, death was patient. It never truly left. It waited. And one day soon, it would return. Months had passed since that night in the playground. Emma tried to rebuild her life, moving to a quieter neighborhood in a small town far from the chaos of the city. She kept busy, working long hours, trying to forget the horrors that had shadowed her for so long. But the silence was never complete. Sometimes, when the wind rustled through the trees or a child's distant laughter floated on the breeze, she felt a chill creep down her spine, a whisper of the past that refused to fade. One ordinary afternoon, Emma walked down a familiar street, clutching a cup of coffee. The sun was warm, the world alive with the simple sounds of life, birds singing, neighbors chatting, children playing. She paused near a playground, the kind of place that once felt safe, now a symbol of fear. A sudden gust of wind scattered fallen leaves at her feet. Emma shivered, glancing around, feeling the weight of unseen eyes. She smiled faintly, telling herself it was just nerves, that she had escaped, that the nightmare was behind her. Then, without warning, a sharp crack echoed through the air. Emma's eyes widened. She stumbled forward, dropping her coffee, as a stifled cry escaped her lips. The world seemed to freeze, a heartbeat stretched into eternity. And then, silence. The playground grew still once more, bathed in the soft glow of the afternoon sun. Somewhere, a child's laughter faded into the distance, carried away by the wind. Death had come quietly, patient and inevitable. The cycle was complete. Emma's story had ended. A snap. A muffled scream. And silence swallowed the world. The patient, cruel hand of fate had finally claimed its due.